Hey now, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track, America's leading Formula One podcast. I'm Brian, that's Rob. Today, just a couple minutes ago, about an hour ago, was a Singapore Grand Prix. It was a race. Full stop. How are you, Rob?
I'm only here so I don't get fined.
So you're just going to give one-word answers there, Max?
No, I'm not, I was thinking, should we be in unison of Max here and just kind of like F-bomb all over this show? But, you know, we don't do that. We don't do that. So
we keep it
let's
clean.
not.
As much as I would like to at times, we keep it clean.
We are the dirty side of the track, yet somehow the clean side of the track, all at the same time. Yeah. Do you know what? As I was driving back from my football game this morning, which we'd won, so I was feeling very happy about life. I was thinking about this race, and bizarrely, I'd been looking at Elizabeth Blackstock's gastronomy, where she does the meals for each race, right? For some bizarre reason, it kind of hit me that Formula One races are a lot like cooking, insofar as they always involve an event, you know, the actual cooking of the meal, and they involve a result. What does it taste like at the end? Some races are like a wok with ingredients going in all the time and spitting, and maybe you put some alcohol in, and there's flames, and it's just all exciting while you're cooking. Other races are like a crock pot where you just put all the ingredients in for 2 hours and walk away and come back at the end and taste it. Today was a crock pot. Today was putting all the ingredients in the crock pot, walking away for 2 hours. And if you're a Lando or McLaren fan, you know, the result tastes good. So things can still taste good, even if the act of cooking them was really, really boring. How do you summarize my analogy of cooking an F1 track?
I'm so happy that you're my co-host because that is a really good analogy. It's highbrow, it's erudite, it's filled with intellect, because I was going to say this season has been so good, so very good. I have some notes on why it's so good in a second. That this is like when you're dating that person who really just makes your heart race, and you guys have a great time going to movies and dinners and shows and hanging out and whatever, and you're just so happy with this season, with that person, with those dates. And then you sit down to watch a movie and they rip a giant fart, and you go, you know what? Every now and then there's a giant fart in the middle of perfection. And that's what today was for me. Not as good as your analogy, but that's what I came up with while I was showering after the race. So
okay, so on that, I mean, basically everybody now is just going to just switch off, because what's the point of listening to us talk about something we didn't enjoy? So I think we'll find ways of picking apart.
I still enjoy it. It's still 2024. It's a great season.
Exactly. Maybe today won't be as much of a lap-by-lap recount that we tend to do, but I think what we will look at is kind of the stories that are unfolding around this race and what it means for the rest of the season. But before we get there, as usual, if you're new to the dirty side, welcome aboard. We will do a news and social roundup of the week. Brian will open up the video vault and we'll see what random videos he's been watching this week.
I got some good ones this week. I have some good ones.
Okay, well, you know, I'll be the judge of that. And then we'll pull the bones out of the Singapore Grand Prix. You've gone a bit stat-tastic, I've seen in the notes, which is great. And then we'll try and work out what we talk about next.
I'm feeling kind of slap house for the stats, even though the race wasn't a banger. We haven't had stats in a while, so stick around for that.
Yeah, we'll definitely do slap house stats. Right, okay, let's jump into news and social. And something we didn't pick up on last week, it's not really news as such, we probably should have just mentioned it last week, so I wanted to put it front and centre, as they say. Colapinto, 4 points in 2 races versus Logan 0 all year, and not even looking close to binning it into a wall or do any kind of crash damage. Has he validated all that outcry of, why are they dropping Logan? What's the point of bringing this kid in for 6-7 races? Validated, I think, Brian.
100%, and especially if you look at today. I know we put these notes together before the race, but when you have Baku and Singapore and those walls just sitting there the whole time, and the grueling test of Singapore, and I actually heard a little bit of his team radio at the end, how tired and fatigued he was and how hard it was to follow, and he even sort of apologized, and James says, you were great. Yeah, 100% validated. I feel bad for Logan, the sergeant. I don't have the music handy, so we're not going to but I think it was the right move. This kid's shown a ton, and the people who know, the reporters and the insiders, keep saying what an impressive drive he turns in every single time. So yeah, he finished 11th today. I know we're skipping ahead, but just out of the points. And yeah,
sorry, go on, Brian.
No, I was gonna say I think he's definitely, the move wasn't bad, letting Logan go at this point. we've seen talent here, and some people are already saying he's a future world champion. I'm like, slow down, take her easy. It's 3 races, but he definitely shown he belongs in the conversation of having a seat.
Well, I agree. And I was going to say what really is interesting is that I thought it was just us being 2 doofuses that had never heard of this guy. Like when they announced it, we were like,
right.
But actually, if you read across kind of all the journalists, like very few people can hand on heart say that they were absolutely watching this kid's trajectory. He's kind of caught. Yeah, they caught the whole thing. He's caught the whole paddock by surprise, and he's making a real case for somebody needing to put him in a car next year. Next year might be a bit of a challenge given what's going on, but we've seen contracts be torn up before. Who knows? Watch this space.
I'm going to let you do this story. I cannot do any more McLaren wing stories. So when you get to that, that's all yours.
You just ruined my segue.
Okay.
Ruined it, Brian.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I said...
Anytime, brother. Should I say it's going to be difficult? Record button?
Stop recording. We'll start this whole thing and re-record all over again because it just popped into my head. I said, it's going to be difficult to make space. And then I was going to go in of talking of making space.
I saved you from a bad segue anyway.
So it was a brilliant segue. So, okay. Last week, about a gazillion posts went viral online of showing the rear wing flexing under load on the McLaren, and the end plate where the DRS flap should remain closed, lifting up like a tiny bit so you could see air would be flowing through there. And they were kind of calling it a mini DRS thing, right? Okay, great. And everyone is just going off on one of their cheating is blah, 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 blah. Now, the thing that gets me is the FIA have measured this thing multiple times. They put it under all the stress tests, put it into everything, and they've said it's compliant. Now, since I wrote these notes in here, what's also happened at the tail end of this week is that McLaren have now come out and said they're going to proactively change their design.
Right. Won't use that one.
Is code for, I think the FIA have pulled them in and gone, look, what you've done there is like really clever, but just a heads up, we're probably going to put a technical directive out to tighten the regs around that because it really shouldn't be moving. What you've done has gone against the spirit of the regs, but you haven't broken any regs. So, little heads up, we'll give you a bit of leadway. McLaren have gone, okay, and then put out a press release. Despite the fact we've got this amazing magic DRS system, we're going to proactively get rid of it. Yes, of course you are. But anyway, I went online and I kind of...
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, just Formula One in general, right? Whether it's double diffusers, whether it's flexi wings, whatever it is. To me, there's always this line in the sand on the floor. And on the one side of it, you've got innovation. On the other side of it, you've got cheating. And if you can stand with both feet on the innovation side and you can lean at 90 degrees over the cheating line, but your feet are still firmly planted on the innovation side, you're legal. And you're just cleverer than everybody else.
Yeah.
And all this ever is sour grapes. And when other people and other teams look at it and kind of go, oh, man, I wish I'd thought of that.
100%. I actually think there should be 2 departments that are, before the cost cap era, that would be sort of superfluous to the team, but you need them. One is the innovation department that you describe. How do you take the regs, the rules, what we do, and bend them, but without, as you say, to use your analogy, keep your feet on the innovation side? And, if we get caught, we stop doing it. But how do we do some of that? And then the second department is the continual appeal of whatever everyone else is doing process department. So whenever anyone else comes up with anything that's at all different, you appeal the living crap out of it to the FIA. You go public, you get annoyed, you complain until they have to stop doing it. And you need both. And I think that's, a lot of people, for example, I get property taxes, as does everyone who owns a home, and mine go up, as does everyone who owns a home. And every year I appeal it. And then when they're done appealing it, I ask them to appeal again and file a second appeal and a third appeal. And I have an attorney who does this, and they get a little bit of the money I save. So why doesn't every team have the property tax appeals department just on standby every day, nonstop? I don't like what they're doing. Their tires are too wide. They're inside. I would have appealed AlphaTauri's white rims. I would have said they were faster because they're cooler, because they don't have the heat, because they're not dark. I would have appealed everything. So anyway, I agree with you 100%, but I cannot hear any more stories about McLaren wings, front wings, flexi wings, rear wings, DRS wings. I don't care.
You will.
I don't care.
You'll keep hearing it every single time somebody comes up with an innovation that the others don't have. But I just want to pick you up on one thing. You said,
yes,
you Department of Innovation, you're going to carry on doing it until you get caught. No.
Oh, for that thing, you keep going.
You only get no. Yeah. But you only get caught cheating you can't get caught innovating.
Well, this is
Now
McLaren just
you
did.
can piss all the other. Well, yes, but the thing what's happened is they've innovated into an area that the FIA wasn't expecting. So they've just kind of gone, look, totally legal what you've done. There's going to be no retrospective penalty coming up, but we are going to tighten the regs in the
Oh
future.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that's what's happened.
That's
So
what I meant to. I mean, you
yeah,
keep innovating. You never stop until someone else's
yeah,
appeals
yeah, yeah.
department, wins one here or there.
Okay, over to Red Bull. I think you picked this one up, didn't you?
Yeah, and this was a sad one. This started coming out early in the week, and I actually on Twitter I sent it out. I go, could this be real? And it was basically a lot of rumors that we're losing Daniel Ricciardo is effectively what it is. We will find his teammate both for the rest of this year and for next year soon. It's going to be Liam Lawson. Like, we know it's going to be Liam Lawson. It's a pretty well kept secret by nobody. And we'll talk more about Danny Rick's drive today and how many GPs he's been in and what he did. But it basically, Yuki's going to have a new teammate. It ain't going to be Danny Rick, and it's going to start soon. And they actually showed, I just saw this right as we started recording, because like I said, we're about an hour after the race. In front of VCarb, RB, Cash App, whatever, Visa, they did a line of people up and down the hospitality in front of it, of his friends and family and other people and guests, and he was hugging each one as he went up and down the line. There's never been a more grand send-off without anyone saying goodbye that I've ever seen in my life, and that's what that was. So we'll talk more about the Honey Badger, Danny Rick, one of my favorites, a little later. But yeah, I think we're going to see a new teammate for Yuki is what that means going forward.
Yeah. And maybe we'll be on the different sides of the fence of this, but I think it's probably time they did do that to him.
I agree,
so,
100%. I don't
Oh,
disagree
okay,
with you at
okay.
all. I actually think when he left McLaren, that should have been the end. But
Well, no, I think when they gave him this one and said it's like almost his audition for the Red Bull seat, he had a period of time to prove himself and to move up. But it was kind of a bad word or bust, where you're either going to audition for the Red Bull seat or you're not going to keep your VCarb seat. And I don't really see this being massively different to Logan to Colapinto. Your Red Bull, you're looking at the potential, well, Danny isn't setting the world alight. He hasn't really come in and made a massive audition for the second Red Bull seat. So if we don't put Liam Lawson into a seat, I think they lose their right on him, or
right, yep.
he'll be out of the Red Bull and he'll be fair game for anybody. So you're starting to look at upsides. What do we do? Just keep hoping that one day Danny Rick discovers the form of a few years ago, or bring this new kid in that actually looks like he's probably got a big future in the sport. So I don't see it being massively different. I know Danny Rick wasn't crashing like Logan, but in terms of team choice, I can see why they would do this.
I actually am more excited about and worried about what this means for Checo, because now if you have two guys, Yuki's still relatively young. If you have two guys who are young at RB, Cash App, Visa, AlphaTauri, Minardi, and one of them really stands out above the other, because I don't think you'd argue that Yuki's strong. Let's not say great, but he's good. And if Liam comes in and shows that he's that much better than Yuki, I think then Checo's seat gets hotter. Hotter 100%. For next year and hotter for other things. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see. So in addition to the parent of sister, brother, whatever, of Visa, Cash App, RB, Red Bull, they did some restructuring. Obviously, GP, we saw a lot of news here. He'll stay as Max's engineer, but he'll have wider responsibilities as he got promoted. We talked about that, I think, last week. Steve Knowles, senior race strategy engineer, will take over regulatory matters now that Jonathan Wheatley is going to be leaving, and senior engineer Rich Wolverton is the new head of race team operation, which, if you'd watched the video vault from a couple weeks ago when we had was it the Haas video vault, and we talked about race engineers, that was good. Alpine, it was Alpine. You got to go watch. It was good. But my last Red Bull note.
Wolverton, does he work with Deadpool?
Apparently.
Sorry, move on. Keep going.
My last Red Bull note for this week was that they were apparently looking at a custom livery for this race and the United States Grand Prix and bailed on it because they couldn't afford the extra weight, because that's how rough the car has been driving.
I was going to say, if you wanted to epitomize kind of struggles that Red Bull now find themselves in, which is totally unheard of. Last year, they could have used heavy-duty lead paint and still cruised home 20 seconds clear. They could have, paint everything, paint it twice, make sure it's matte black, really dark, heavy black paint. We don't care. This year, hey, guys, we're going to do a custom livery. And Horner's like, How much weight's that going to add?
Like 4 grams. Nope,
Hardly
can't
anything.
afford it.
We paint the car anyway. We're 4 grams. No, we can't. There's no way we are going to be in the points if we put that much weight on the car.
At this point, they're watching Max eat breakfast.
Just shows...
They're like, you want a second egg? I don't think so. Oh man! Speaking of Max,
and then I found this one.
Yeah, go for it. I don't believe this at all.
Oh, this is. I don't believe this at all either. But it just made me laugh, so I pulled it off. I can't even remember which. Something on Twitter. If you want the long-range rumor mill, then Max is being courted by Mercedes, which we kind of know, but it's actually going to happen. And in 26, the driver pairing there will be Verstappen and Antonelli as Audi are courting Russell. There we go. Heard it here first on the dirty side.
Well, there were other,
was it
Horner or someone who then later said Russell does come out of contract and we'd be silly not to talk to him after 20. I mean, we'll see. We're playing in silly season too far in advance. A couple Baku notes just to close last week's race, and we will do fantasy update from Baku, so hang on to all of you who have won and done well. This, with Oscar's win, we've now had 4 teams having multiple race winners, the first time since 1990. And we haven't had 4 teams winning at least 3 races each since 1977. Ferraris won 3. This was before today. So Ferraris won 3, Red Bulls won 7, McLaren's won 4, now 5, and Mercedes has won 3. And I did the math. I went through and I checked. So that's 4 teams who have won 3 or more races. The first time we've had this since 1977. So Rob Reed, I know you're out there. I know you're writing articles for Forbes about what a great season this is. Throw that stat into your next article because that was powerful to see. And last week we talked about the Hulk and what a good job he did. Again, he showed back up again and did a great job this week. But after last week's 11th finish, he is the new owner of the record for the most finishes one place outside the points. Now, as we all know, the points have changed over the years. It used to pay to 8, so it used to be a 9th, but whatever. He now has the most finishes one spot outside the points 7 times in 2024. He did not add to it today because he was in the points. But he broke the 1992 record of Michel Alboreto. So that is fantastic. As we've said this before, he also owns the records already, most GPs without a win. The hard one is most GPs without a podium. That's a tough one to have because that's a lot of races and a lot of times not on the podium. And my last news item was sad. And I saw this and it didn't get a lot of coverage. Checo's dad had a heart attack last weekend, or a pre-heart attack. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's lost in translation from Spanish. But regardless, he ended up in the hospital and was receiving medical attention. And that's terrible to see, that a driver's father would have a heart attack. Literally, they said right after the race, which is when Checo went into the wall. I hope the two are completely unrelated. And I, of course, hope that Checo's dad's doing great because, it's hard to... We've talked a little bit about this, but how hard is it to divorce yourself from everyday life when you go out and race a race car? Like, I go to work and I have things on my mind like, God, I got to remember to pay that bill after work today, or I got to pick my kid up early, or, this is happening with a friend of mine, or my uncle's sick, or this, that, and the other. And these guys are just like us. So Checo gets in the car thinking of his dad. He has to be. And he had a horrendous race today, and we'll get to that. But those are the kinds of things that I don't think we always give enough credit to, that the guys getting in those cars are people just like us.
Yep. And on that note, I think it's time to open up the video.
I'm really excited about this one. There's a lot of random stuff in here. I'm really pumped about this one. I'm going to try to
looked down the notes and I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. I'm going to try not to
I looked down the notes and I was like, you can tell.
Yeah, what do you say?
Brian didn't travel for work this week.
Yes, you can. You can totally tell I was home. I had evenings with my computer and YouTube. So first off, the Great Singa-Tour. Valtteri and Joe are your expert tour guides of Singapore's most iconic spots on the Sauber channel. Nearly 6 minutes. This is fun. Watching these two guys look for good Instagram spots is really what it is. Doesn't say that in the title necessarily, but they're walking around taking good pictures, and it was really kind of neat. The Azerbaijan GP 2024 highlights comedy on F1 racing. Lollipop Man. Again, we don't talk about it every week because we watch it and just assume we should. Same with Racing Bricks, and same with Maddie and Tommy's P1 funniest tweets. This was one of the best of the year. So if you're bored and want to go back, watch the Baku recap on Lollipop Man. Just nailing it. And then as I'm watching at the end, his Patron is 7 pages long now. So dude's finally starting to get all the attention and money that he deserves. Richest and poorest F1 drivers on Throttle Talk. It's 8 minutes. And they basically explain how a lot of the drivers on the grid today, some of them were poor when they grew up and some of them were rich when they grew up. And we knew about most of them. Like Lance Stroll's rich. I didn't know his dad's a billionaire. Of course you knew that. We all knew that. Esteban Ocon grew up in humble beginnings. We'd heard these stories. I didn't realize they lived in a trailer for a while because they had to sell their house as a family. But there's a lot to this, and it's a good story. However, the only one I didn't know, Lando was rich? Lando's dad's like $200 million? I had no clue. I thought Lando was like sort of a normal... I had no idea he was rich. A guy, did you know this?
No, and I mean, is his dad Belgian? And
I don't know.
I know that he's got a bit of a strange accent, and I think Lando might have two passports, so I might have made that up, that he's British and Belgian, well, I'm not sure. And that's all I really knew about him. I didn't know that his dad was loaded.
Loaded! And so apparently if you have 200 million euros, pounds, dollars, whatever, you can have more passports if you want. It's not just the nationality of your parents. You can just, extra passports. What are the logistics behind an F1 season on the Siva Logistics channel? Again, I don't sleep for you guys. I am out there surfing the web. And as you may know, as for the Ferrari fans, which I'm becoming a bigger and bigger one awaiting the Lewis arrival, you'll see Siva on their uniforms, on their race suits. This is their partner. This was the C-squared content I've been waiting for all season, and I had to go to the Siva channel to get it. 6 minutes of Carlos and Charles quizzing each other on all sorts of things, matters important and not. Charles, what would be one thing you'd want to have that Carlos is good at? And he could come up with nothing except his hair. So you gotta go in. Carlos was hurt.
My gosh.
You gotta go watch it. But then the last couple things, we'll close it quick here, or not, I guess, actually, because these are rabbit holes. First off, I'm an F1 GeoGuessr genius on Mr. V's Garage. It's nearly 18 minutes, so you have to be a nerd like me. Welcome to fast forward 20 seconds as I explain why this is good. If you like maps and the idea of geoguessing, which I've never done before, it's a video where they show a picture of a track, and the guy has to figure out from this spot on a track where they are in the world. And you're like, oh, I would love to do this. Unfortunately, you have to have a paid subscription because, yes, I followed it down the rabbit hole. You have to have a paid subscription to do this. It is so cool. Like, they show a spot of any track of the past, and this person who is a bigger nerd than we are knows, oh, I know what track this is or what country this is. Let's figure out where on the track. And you drop a pin on the map. So then I went to GeoGuessr and I signed up for a free account, and I am really good at this thing. They give you 3 a day. Man, I'm nailing these. I've never been more than a couple kilometers away from the actual place. So that may be my new hobby, but I just don't know if I have $3 a month to waste on it. But anyway, great video if you're into maps, racing, and things like that. And then the last thing I have, just to close, is me just telling a very fast story. I saw a note about someone doing an LRS Formula event where they were driving a Benetton race car. And I said, oh, I would love to drive an F1 car. Regular people driving F1 cars. And I started researching this thing. And they do races at Barcelona. They do races at a couple races in throughout France. And they used to do them at Portimao. They don't have any for next year because I love Portimao. I want to go to the Algarve and check it out. And so I floated it by my wife. I said, hey, I got an idea. What if you and I take a vacation and we go to Europe and I drive an F1 car one of the days? And she goes, how much is it going to cost? And when I explained it to her and then we added airfare onto it, she's like, how about we don't? And I go, all right. So we won't. But there were a couple good videos on VinWiki and on Mr. JWW where they showed people driving, retired F1 cars. And we'll put those out there. It's just fun. That's a dream. One day when I have more money than sense, that's what I'll do, is I'll go drive one of those F1 cars. But with that, I have to close a very long and detailed video called.
Action-packed one there.
The GeoGuessr thing was a lot of fun. I swear to God. Like, go check it out. Like, you will enjoy it. I promise, Rob.
Oh, man. Okay, so that brought us on to race weekend. Again, because of where it was in the world, I kind of watched the highlights of practice. I didn't get up at 5:30 a.m. to watch some of the sessions. I kind of really do what we did last week. I think we can kind of sum all of practice up in a couple of lines, which was that McLaren looked like the ones to watch. George was showing pace, but Lewis didn't seem to have it. Ferrari didn't look quick, and Red Bull were kind of looking like their struggles might continue. And then we got Godzilla causing a red flag on the.
Did you see when they put the timer on it? It was a Williams. They gave it Godzilla in a Williams car. I don't know if you saw it, but they put a timer on him running down the thing. and they called him out.
That thing could shift. That thing could really shift. It was that was funny when it was. The legs don't look like. It doesn't look like a lizard should be able to generate forward movement when you see it running. Like the limbs are just kind of going everywhere.
Right. Oh, was that oversteer? That's a lot of oversteer.
Okay, so that kind of took us into quali, and if all of the sort of eyes were on Danny Rick because of these rumors coming around, what he really wanted to avoid was going out in Q1. Did he get on, Brian?
I went out in Q1. And if you wanted to also avoid this letdown on this weekend, you definitely wouldn't want to have your teammate do a lot better than you. So just out of curiosity, did Yuki make it? Did he get eliminated in Q2?
Nope.
So, wait, you're telling me Yuki made it to Q3? Not good for Danny Rick.
Not good look for Danny Rick, no. So joining Danny Rick out in Q1 was Stroll, Gasly, Bottas, and Zhou. The Sauber woes continue. Never even looked like making it out of Q3 these days.
I don't know what's going on.
It's just so sad. I wonder if if they've almost done a Haas and they've just given up on this year, because they don't seem to bring any kind of upgrade at all.
No.
They're just dead set for being last every single.
I think the next time out, they're just going to cut a hole in the floor and tell Valtteri and Joe to pedal as fast as they can on the ground. Flintstone that thing.
Yeah, and then Q2. I was going to say it's a shock. I'm not sure it is a shock. It just feels like maybe old habits are kind of creeping back into Checo's qualifying weekend form. He'd kind of done all right recently, and then all of a sudden we find himself down in 13 behind both the Williams boys.
Both the Williams boys.
Yeah,
both
that's Colapinto. We mentioned him right at the beginning. Finished ahead of him. They were unlucky not to make it in. I think it was the probably the pace of. Who do we have go through that was maybe unexpected? Maybe Sonoda and Hulkenberg, kind of those two found some pace and probably took the Williams. Albon was running an upgrade that Colapinto wasn't, but there was literally nothing between them. It was 007, I think, and the James Bond difference between the two of them. So.
And then Stroll went out 17th in Q1 and Fernando 7th in Q3. It feels like you say some of the old stories about teammate deltas are coming back, and it's Checo and it's Stroll, and unfortunately it was Danny Rick. And then we go to Q3, and Carlos decides to start his lap off backwards. I got to say this one thing. Like, this makes me sound dumb. Maybe it's okay. It's all right. When I watch the live feed of the track and you see something happen in the background, it excites me more than watching a replay of it. Maybe it's obvious, but I saw Carlos's car going backwards in qualifying in the background of the shot because they were showing Lando coming across.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And then you see it and then you're like, what was that? And you're like, I hope they're okay. Was that a crash? And then sometimes, the commentators catch it right away. Sometimes they don't. Crofty caught it. He's like, uh-oh, someone was going backwards back there. And it cost Max his lap because it was a quick double waved yellow. But yeah, Carlos decided to start off with chaos early on in qualifying.
And again, I don't know anything about driving a Formula One car, but when they showed the onboard and they said
shocker.
he put the car into push mode as he's approaching the corner and then floored it and then lost the rear, it feels like those two things maybe played into the whole spinneroo. It's like, maybe don't put it into push until you're straight.
Well, he'd also been off the racing line. He'd been on.
He pulled over, hadn't he, to let Lando through or whoever through, and then just put it into push mode, floored it. And the back came around, and that was that. And then Leclerc decided that he would feel sorry for his teammate and join him down at the back. And his only good lap that he put in wasn't actually that good. And he ran wide and fell foul of track limits and joined Sainz fifth row lockout, I think, as you said in the notes or on WhatsApp. You were like, yeah, fifth row lockout for Ferrari. Woo.
It was. Good job for them. I know that's where Fred was hoping they'd be. But as we already said, Colapinto didn't make it to Q3, but looked really good. Hulk did make it to Q3, finished 6th. That's crazy. That's fantastic for what Nico's doing in that car. And you know what? I got to be honest, now that they've improved this season in terms of their race pace and the way that they eat the tires, which last year was their weakness, Hulkenberg's looking better and better. He's always had that Saturday ability to put the car above its place. And now he's actually holding on to it. And we saw it a lot today. And as we said already, he's got the record for most 1 spot out of points finishes in a season, which I think everyone would agree. The Haas, being 11th, when you have 4 teams that are dominant, that's pretty damn good.
Yeah, agree. And then if you kind of look at the remainder of the lineup there, Norris getting pole probably wasn't a surprise. If I'm honest, Max turning around what didn't look like a fast car in practice to go and throw it on second, he's really dragged that car around and got every last piece out of that
Seems
one.
like it. Yep.
The disappointment is going to be, and obviously we'll talk about it in the race, but Piastri just had a scruffy lap, let's put it that way, and allowed both of the Mercedes boys to nip ahead of him. So we ended up with Norris, Verstappen, Hamilton, Russell, Piastri, Hulkenberg, Alonso, witness protection, Tsunoda, Leclerc, and Sainz as our starting grid. And before we get to the start and the lights out, really felt like a bit of an indicator that we were going to be on for a bit of a boring race, where the highlight of Brundle's pit walk was pointing out the steps that Alonso uses to get into his car and how they are quite cheap and you can buy them off Amazon if you want them.
Really?
He was trying to make some big comparison about like a really low tech cheap thing from Amazon is being used alongside a car that costs like $1 gazillion, but you're using this cheap little set of steps so that you don't stand on the car when you get in. But I was like, wow. Wow, this is like Brian plumbing the depths of some really weird video channels now.
I've made it to the Marriott Bonvoy channel again.
Yeah, and that's where Brundle was today. He was on Amazon ordering metal steps. But anyway, shock horror. We get to say it. Lando started on pole. Lando led at the end of the first lap.
I know. He had a great start. He had a great start.
He did.
Really, everybody kind of did at the beginning. No one really went horribly backwards. It just meant with the first corner, we had a little bit of carnage and chaos, and some people had to run wide as they would be driving off to the right as we were watching to the left and then go around. Colapinto picked up all the way up to ninth, which was a nice move. He passed a bunch of people on the inside, and you know who didn't like that too much? Alex Albon. He's like, "What's Frederick doing?" He's stealing your place, bro.
He's putting an amazing move on you, to be honest. But there we are.
But yeah, I mean, I was curious. Lewis started on softs. Everyone else was on the mediums all the way back to 13. So the question was going to become, could Lewis make up some spots? And by lap 3, Lewis was still third. And I wrote, the softs will be disappointed because they were useless and they're going to screw his race. That's a big gamble at a hot place like this where DAG does matter and you're on the softest of the soft compounds. If you don't get something out of the softs, starting out of the softs on a different kind of strategy, you kind of shot yourself because now they're going to die early. You're going to have to pit earlier onto tires that other people will have fresher towards the end. And it really did hose Lewis's day up.
The only way this worked would have been that the soft slaps that he gave him super grip and he was maybe able to jump max.
Yep, agree.
Make some decent lap time for a while and then pray for a safety car. That was the only way that strategy really works out, I think.
Even if he'd passed
but
Max
it was just
and then gone long enough to like not have such a delta at the end, it still could have worked. It could have been a little better. Getting nothing out of it and then pitting super early, that had to have been the nightmare scenario for them when they thought the strategy through, and that's what happened.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it looked really, really early on like this was going to be the case. Although as the cars get lighter, as they burn off fuel and they get faster, and tires start falling off, maybe we see more overtakes. The fourth DRS section here did nothing. We never really saw anybody lunge on anyone. Like DRS just didn't seem to function today. Like was everyone's flaps like glued closed or something? Because I don't really remember seeing any. Like people were hanging out in DRS, but they were never really getting close or getting their nose in a place where they could do an overtake. Like DRS just managed to close them up from you were 0.6 seconds behind somebody. At the end of the DRS, you'd be 0.4. Like, oh, whoopee-doo. You know, you need to be within 0.2 to be putting the move on. So it was already falling into that. I saw you in the notes that you'd written kind of higher management already.
No, well, I mean, please. You nailed it when you said if Martin's ginning up interest with stairs for Fernando to get into the car. To me, the problem I realized early was by lap 6, we'd had 2 full laps of them just showing replays of the start from different camera angles because there wasn't nothing happening out on track. It was hold position. And then by lap 10 of 62, Lando had already opened up 4 seconds on Max. Max in second had opened up 4 seconds on Lewis. Those were the biggest gaps in the race, and they were at the front, which is not normally what you want to see for an exciting race to unfold, especially since we've been treated to an epic season so far. No changes in position since lap 1. And then we see Danny Rick pit on lap 11. We see Albon pit on 12. We hear people, at least initially, saying the hards were bad or were taking time to come into their own. And I'm sitting here thinking that's good news for Ferrari, who never work well on hards. But it turned out to be a little premature. It was Magnussen being a little nervous Nelly. You just needed to work them into their window and keep them in the window. And so at this point, by like lap 12 or 13, I'm really freaking out that we're going to sit here and watch a snooze fest the rest of the race because ain't nothing happening. And like even the pit strategies, it's yes. Maybe the undercut's going to be powerful. That's about all we're learning is will the undercut be powerful enough to change people's strategic approaches to pit stops? Not really.
And one of the most exciting things was that a tear-off or something got lodged in Albon's duct and caused him to retire and grew my fantasy team in the same process. But yep. Lewis came in and boxed off the softs. Where are we? Kind of coming up to like 18 or so. We've got Max is 13 seconds behind
13.
Lando at this point.
Dang.
Yeah, and Russell in third is 11 behind Max. It's all just opening up into this place that you kind of don't want to see. The only person that was kind of looking like he might make moves, but again, I don't know whether the McLaren just doesn't like to run behind cars. Piastri always says it's more of a rocket ship when it's in clean air. He looked like he was going to maybe get interested and maybe overtaking someone, but it never really seemed to come off. But like, I don't know if because of the way the walls are, and they mentioned about like the lack of wind or the lack of anything, all the air just sort of seems to hold in place. Do we get like just does this track just even with the modern cars now, with the supposedly easier to follow, do you think they just suffer from lots and lots of turbulent air? And you keep seeing them on the straights moving off the line just to try and get some fresh air over the car, right, and cool it down. I mean, I don't know what it is about this track, but we never really saw anything kind of happening.
No, we didn't. And then at this point, we're at lap 18, 19, 20 or ish, and you already talked about Oscar potentially looking frisky. We have Hulkenberg in fifth, driving a fine race. I ain't got nothing against the Hulk and what he did today. He did exactly what he should have done. Clean race. Offense, more defense than offense, but did a good job. He was holding up Fernando, and he was absolutely killing Charles behind Fernando. Charles is back there. He can't get past Fernando because it's sort of a DRS train for him. Fernando can't get the Hulk, and Charles is just dying back in seventh. He's losing like fractions of a second every lap, and he's just watching his chances of a podium just disappear in front of him as he's stuck here. Just stuck.
Yeah.
And that it's one of those things where I think it reiterates the importance of quali. You cannot throw away a lap with track limits. You cannot mess up and crash as you start your push lap. You got to do better. And so when Ferrari locks out the fifth row, this is what they get stuck with, sitting behind an Aston Martin and a Haas.
And Piastri to some degree with his scruffy quali, putting him behind both Mercedes. He was just kind of never really able to kind of make a move. Then we kind of got I don't know whether Lando was realizing that people at home might think everything was getting a little bit boring, but he kind of brushed a wall and suddenly there was radio panic that he might have wing damage, but nothing was going to happen to make this interesting.
When they show that onboard, though, you got to give him credit. He locks up and goes at the wall and just kisses it with the wing and tire. And the wall, 100%. This is one of the walls I gave a little bit. I'm like, oh, man, you lucked out. That was one of his 9 lives on the day because he had a couple of these situations.
100%.
So at this point, everyone except McLaren and Leclerc have boxed, right? And so then Lando boxes. They keep the wing as it is. And by lap 36, I think I wrote, I'm not sleeping, you are. And it was just a bunch of pit stops. And again, loved it. I love the whole thing because I'm still on this high from the season. One little, what'd you say, Crockpot? I will use your example. One little race, Crockpot race is fine. And then McLaren once again leaves Oscar out. I don't know. Like, I hate to gin up something that may not be real, but it just feels like McLaren is so wishy-washy at times with strategy. Oscar is basically one of the only people out there who hasn't boxed. And he's running behind Lando, and they are just praying for a safety car. Is that a strategy? Is that a real, I wrote bad words, strategy? To just say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to stay out as long as we can and hope for a safety car. And then the question should be asked, and if that doesn't happen? we'll be happy to see what we can do at that point. But is that a real strategy?
Do you think he was close enough to undercut Lewis if he had gone earlier?
I don't know, but I think if he'd gone
Because if he didn't
earlier,
get the track position, then if you pit and end up still behind Lewis, then nothing happened. And we're already kind of over halfway through the race, and it doesn't look like there's going to be much overtaking opportunities on this track. So do you just roll the dice and go, oh, screw it. We've had a safety car every year here.
right?
We've got track position now, 1-2. Let's just see if the F1 gods smile on us and send somebody into a wall. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it doesn't seem like a strategy as such, as more of a just kind of a Hail Mary of just,
It's
let's
what
just
Haas
see if
used
this
to do.
works.
Right, it's what Haas used to do. They'd qualify decently. They'd run out in soft tires and try to make it far enough along and pray for a safety car. And then when it didn't happen, they'd have to box early and go to hards, and they'd be back where they were supposed to be. Like Oscar was on the podium. Okay, I know that. I just still think if his strategy had been tightened up a little bit, maybe he rocks up and gets closer to Max. Maybe he doesn't have to spend the time passing Lewis and George. I don't know. Just
Yeah, maybe.
yeah.
What happened?
I don't know, nothing. He boxes like on 39, comes out behind him. Lando is 23 seconds out of Max by this point. Max is 15 seconds ahead of George. We're watching Colapinto in 11th, which is still fascinating that he's hanging on there. We have, after George, we have Lewis, Oscar, Carlos, Fernando, Charles, Nico, and Checo. So Checo is now running last in the points positions, which, by this point is a little alarming that Max is somehow a second, and Checo once again cannot make a dent on the race that he started. And then we get a little bit of team orders where we say, all right, on lap 42, we're going to have Yuki and Danny Rick swap, and Charles and Carlos as well, because of different tire strategies and deltas and speed. And so they do those couple swaps, a couple team orders in a row, which, again, I had no problems with these calls. They were literally on different strategies. I think if they left them out, I think Charles gets Carlos and Yuki gets Danny Rick, but they just ruin their tires and waste time doing it. So to me, those were totally fine team orders. And then at this point, Oscar does get the second of the Mercedes. He gets George, moves into third on lap 45. And once again, I started falling asleep.
Yeah, we didn't really get. Magnussen got a puncher, which gave us something to get interested in.
Well, and before that, actually, 48. One thing I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight: Lando brushes a wall with his rear tire this time.
Oh yeah,
and so
life 2.
Yeah, exactly, life number 2. And so at this point, I'm like, what is happening? And the commentators are saying, is that something that'll wake you up? Is it'll refocus you? Will this help you? And I'm just thinking, dude, you've got a 25-ish, give or take. He was 29, 23. It was moving around at the end. But 25 seconds on Max. Just don't hit stuff. We watched Magnussen hit the wall at the same rate, puncture. What do you think?
I know. Do you wonder if, when you're driving an F1 car, if you're not driving it almost not to the limit all the time, but if you're not at that end of it, easing off, I wonder if it is sometimes worse than you kind of trying to nurse a car home. You can almost get complacent and trip over. So you've kind of got to be pushing hard enough. I think his engineer came on at one point, didn't he, and kind of just reminded him of the gap he had and was like,
right.
We don't need to set the world alight right now. But it must be difficult as a driver if you're like being metronomic and you're hitting this apex, you're almost kissing the wall, and you're just doing the same thing for 62 laps, especially when you're out front like that, trying to do something different, slowing down, easing off, different line. I mean, maybe that's a variant that could kind of see you go into a wall. I don't know, but yeah, that was definitely life number 2 out of his 9.
Exactly, totally right. And then you nailed it, Magnussen, as our Canadian friends would call him, with a puncture. And so he comes out on softs, and I'm like, oh, this is fascinating. They're going to go for a fastest lap, and he gets it, but the little tickler on the little purple thing on the screen never leaves Lando. And I'm like, what? And then they later, a couple laps later, say, oh, he went over track limits, so it did not count. So Lando's life number 3. He saves his fastest lap and doesn't have to think about it because Magnussen went over the line. And now we're kind of getting exciting. We're getting very close to the end. Can Charles catch George is really the question. And there was a decent gap by lap 56, a lot of work for Charles to do. Checo in 10th is still behind Hülkenberg. And Colapinto is really kind of up on Checo. So I'm watching this with rapt attention. I'm like, all right, we'll invent some stuff to kind of check out here at the end of the race. By lap 59, 3 laps to go, Charles is all over George. And I'm like, this is awesome. But exactly like you said, it never really materialized.
I think he also took too much out of his tires,
Yeah, you're probably right.
closing that gap down.
That's a
Because
good call.
like you say, he absolutely went after him. And then when he got there, I don't know that he couldn't get close, got caught in the turbulent air, whatever it was. But also, I think he kind of probably fried his tires a little bit. But the only thing that Colapinto did wrong, I think this time around, was that he didn't do very well under the blue flag situation because he was quite really close up to Checo. I think he was like getting close to almost maybe getting to DRS. Not that it would have mattered here, but he was almost getting to DRS. Then they went through the whole blue flag thing, and after that, and I know you've got a note on here about what Lando did, but we'll get to that in a second. But coming out of both of them being passed
Further
by
away.
Lando, 3.2
Yep.
seconds, kind of maybe gave Lando too much room.
Or you did it too soon. I mean, like
Yeah, yeah.
that's a Fernando Alonso move, right? You have to be so comfortable driving the car that when you give up a spot, you do it strategically. That's not something you expect a rookie to do, and certainly not at Singapore. And you nailed it. I think he did it the right way without thinking through the ramifications of when and how, and he came out further behind because of it. If he does it on the right straight or before a corner and catches up, but yeah, you nailed it. I think that's just a rookie thing. However, when he let Lando by, Lando went running wide. We got into the marbles on the dirty side of the track, and then he comes out and goes way wide in the corner, and I'm like, Lando, this is the fourth thing you've gotten really lucky for in the last few laps. Take her easy, man. Take her easy. But so then one of the things that really, we said we talk about Danny Rick, and I have him in the stats. He pits. He boxes. He's near the end anyway. He boxes for tires with 2 laps to go. And I'm like, what? At first, I thought he was retiring because K-Mag retired. They both went in, maybe 3 laps to go. They both go to the pits, and I'm like, they're both retiring. K-Mag had given a shot at the fastest lap. Who knows what other damage he had after he hit the wall. He was done. And then they say Danny Rick's going back out on softs. I'm like, what? His last race, I'm like, okay, his last race, he wants to see if he can get a fastest lap. And then the conspiracy theory starts. The little tinfoil hat comes down on my head.
I don't even think this is that tinfoily if you're about to go where I'm going. Keep going.
Well, he drives for Visa Cash App RB Minardi. And so they are Red Bull's sister team. Max, Red Bull's number 1 driver, is in a championship battle with Lando, who has the fastest lap. Danny Rick will finish last, 18th or whatever it is, 17th. He won't get a point for this. What he will do is take a point from Lando. And I think Danny Rick being the 4th driver in the stable, Max, Checo Yuki very closely, and then lower Danny Rick losing his job. They're like, do you mind if you go out there and do something which is pointless to you but helps our number 1 driver a bit? And he did it well. And so I think Lando lost a point in the championship battle because Red Bull has 2 teams.
Yeah, and I don't see that as tinfoil hatty at all, because if there's no relationship between those 2 teams and there's no pressure coming from Red Bull onto Visa Cash App to go and do fastest lap, why would they ever even go for the fastest lap at the end there? It's like you say, it's literally pointless because you're outside the 10.
Yeah.
It's pointless. You're outside the top 10. You're not going to get a point for fastest lap. There's literally nothing in it for you. Anybody kind of saying, oh, the conspiracy theorists are out in their masses saying that Red Bull influenced that pit stop. 2, there's no logical reason for Danny Rick to go in unless, I mean, maybe the smallest slither I can give you is he's like, this is my last Formula One race, so I want to have the fastest lap.
That's the only thing I
really?
could think of. That's the best I could come up with.
That's the best. I mean, yeah, which one feels more likely? Not sure.
Can I just say one thing about Danny Rick? We're going to do this in pieces, apparently. He was driver of the day. I'm happy.
How?
Hold on. Give me a second. I'm happy the Honey Badger was driver of the day. He could do his shoey when he gets home, all this, that, and the other. He did not deserve it. We both agree. This was a sentimental vote. Fine.
Yeah.
Here's my problem with the whole situation. Fantasy, I know we're ahead. Fantasy gives you points, 10 points for driver of the day, 10 points for fastest lap. Danny Rick had 20-some-odd points because of that last 2-lap situation. He was last. He finished last in the race. He was out in Q1. Why does he have all these points? So I very briefly before this saw like friends of the show, Fantasy Rob and Fantasy HQ Adam and others, Pot Pan Man and Yank the Mic and others complaining about this. They're right. That's dumb. Danny Rick does not deserve 20-some-odd fantasy points because he boxed to help Max and is retiring.
And driver of the door. Driver of the day being so weighted, like 10 points is a big deal in fantasy for something which is something completely subjective of just if a certain fan base decides to vote in their masses. It's got nothing to do with the action on track as we saw today. It's ridiculous. But that was the end of the race. Lando brought it home, didn't use up his 9 lives. Bert Mylander is just literally still sleeping in his car because no one's tapped him on the shoulder now. But yeah, it's like the only thing he's done recently to just remind everybody he still exists is crash.
Yeah, he crashed in Monza. That's right. I forgot about that. What was it? Parabolica? He just right into the wall. Yeah,
and no yellows. So this is the first time in Singapore history that there have been no yellows and no safety cars? I believe.
Correct.
I mean, obviously one probably. Safety car,
but yes, no yellows either. Yes, no safety cars, neither one. First time ever, and that's like 8 or so races in a row. And I will screw up the stat, and I'll do it now though. It's like 8 races in a row this year without a safety car because there's VSC at the end of Baku.
Singapore, no safety car, no yellows, no action.
No action. Is that what you said at the end?
Yeah.
I can't refute that. Should we talk a little bit about the podium before we move on? Lando, Max, Oscar. You know what? Lando drove an amazing race. He started well. He held on to it. He's, as Lollipop Man would say, using Max's book of domination. He dominated. He did a great job. He had some foibles, some little challenges. 4 of his 9 lives were used today to hold on to that win. He did not get the Grand Slam. I'll talk about that in a second because I was sitting at home yelling, I should have predicted a Grand Slam for Lando because I did it that one time for Max. Max drove an outstanding race. From quali onwards, you see why he's a generational talent, a 3-time champion, he's phenomenal, just phenomenal job.
I think what played into that as well, that he'd saved up, reserved a bunch of cognitive capacity for focusing on the race by not giving any answers in interviews. It didn't have, because he wasn't using his brain to think about answers. He could use all of it to drag that car around Singapore.
I thought you were saying it's because he's moved his sim racing to more to Minecraft or whatever the other game he's been playing online is. But all right then. And then Oscar was on the podium in 3rd. Oscar again
he's done a great job there.
He did, exactly. He didn't have a great quali. Yeah. It was a bit of a recovery drive. I still think they screwed the strategy hoping for a safety car, and he still made it into lemonade out of lemons. That podium, those 3 really showed what talented drivers they all were in different ways in today's race.
Yeah. With no gifted, not that I can say that George Russell kind of didn't deserve his win in his podiums, but there was nothing gifted about any of those 3 steps on the podium this week. They were all earned for different reasons. So yeah.
Well, let's talk about. You have to go first this week for King and for Pits. So we'll do King first, and you get to make your King of the Pits.
No, let's. I like. Oh, you're playing it.
No, we can just do.
I
that
like
the
thing where we finish on a high.
I'm just playing. That's not. That's just us getting ready for this. Is Oh, you want to start with the Pits? Let's go. With the
Go to Pits.
Who do you have, Rob, as the Pits this
week? I'm right. Okay. First off, I was going to come on here and go Checo, just because I just felt with what Max did with the car, we're back into the old days of Max being able to do one thing with the car and Checo just making it look terrible. But am I allowed to give it? No, I can't give it to the fact that Red Bull have basically got 2 teams. I just didn't like the whole Danny Rick thing at the end. I didn't like it, but I'm not sure how I can turn that into the pits. But I think I gave you grief one week for picking a non-driver. So I will go in. I can give it to Red Bull for being able to lean on VCarb, Cash App, whatever, to get Danny Rick a fastest lap. But yeah, whole driver of the day thing and all of that. That is my pits from this race weekend. What about you?
All right, so I've got 2, and I always struggle. I want to say Checo because finishing 10th when Max finishes 2nd, finishing a lap down in the same machine that's not good, man. Not good. He's a Baku specialist. We were all running on a high. with what he did, and then we're back to bad performances. And like I said, if Liam Lawson comes in and he or Yuki really look good through the rest of the year, his seat gets even hotter than it was in Singapore today. That said, I've renamed this the honorary Sergio Checo Perez You're the Pits Award, and so I can't give it to him today, especially with his pops not doing great. It wasn't great for him, but it's kind of what we expected. I'm giving it to Albon because I love Alex Albon, and he is a tremendous driver. He didn't finish the race. Yes, he may have had a bag in his duct or he was overheating, but he wasn't looking great the whole weekend. And he had the upgrades, which could have been downgrades. We don't know. You know, you put an upgrade on, you don't know. But Colapinto was a 007 away from him in like his third ever race in Singapore. He gets taken off the line and run wide while everyone else goes through. And he had no impression on the race until he had to retire for the overheating. And I expect Albon to be the Williams driver. Like, I expect him to be at the front and kicking butt. I don't expect a guy who I'd not heard of until 3 weeks ago to be flipping it on me. So now I am greatly curious to see what Alex and Carlos look like next year. And I'm going to learn a lot. So anyway, I'm going to give it to Albon just because I expect more from a guy. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't Albon. Is what I'm giving it for.
Oof. Well, now you can fire up the music you've been threatening to play 600 times.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm supposed to play the whole thing or just the beginning? I'm kidding. I'm just messing with you.
You're the king of the pits.
So help me God, if you give this to Danny Ricardo, I'm never recording an episode again.
Okay. It's almost kind of what we just said about the podium. Could have quite easily given it for Oscar for his comeback drive and making amends for a bad quali. I could absolutely give it to Max for giving what we all think is a struggling Red Bull and still managed to bring it home, not just second, but miles clear of third. But I just can't not say Lando. I mean, other than a dodgy call at the end, he's done the Grand Slam. He's led from the beginning when he's been under pressure massively recently. That must be playing on his mind. He nails it, does a fabulous start, leads it from lap 1, and never, ever looks back. Yes, he used 4 or 5 of his 9 lives, however many we counted up. But you know what? You make your own luck sometimes, and he didn't do anything wrong. Didn't really do anything majorly wrong, and was a silly decision away from a Grand Slam. So for me, he has to wear the King of the Pits crown.
I'm good with that. I'm fine with Lando being the king. Like you said, any of the podium 3 would have been great. You could make a reason for a lot of drivers. I'm giving it to Nico Hülkenberg. I give him too much grief. I don't give him enough credit. I've thought of him as middling. I was surprised when Haas put him in that chair. I was wrong. He has turned into a qualifying beast, and now that the car isn't a crap show on Sundays, he's turning into something else. It reminded me a lot of the way when everyone was stuck behind him, and he drove for mile after mile, lap after lap, with the car up his trumpet, the way that Oscar did with Charles in Baku, with walls around you, and you literally are like looking in your mirrors the whole time as you're going forward. And he held those cars off, and he did it he didn't do it in a dirty way, right? He didn't brake late and cut someone off. He didn't, jink left and then go right and then do all these things. I got to give it to the Hulk. I've never been high on the Hulk, and I've watched him a couple races now. I'm like, this guy is really given everything that car has and leaves it all out there. And he was actually fatigued when they interviewed him after the race. He said, "Can you keep it short? I'm not feeling great." And I'm like, good on you, Nico. So anyway, I give him a lot of crap, but I'd say Nico for me. Shall we hit some stats, or should we?
Oh my gosh!
Hear from Paul.
Let's hear from Paul. I've just scrolled down to see quite how statistic you've gone, and we could be here for. Oh well, good, because we could be here for another 2 hours. But yeah, let's fire up the Paul music and see what he thought.
Hey now. Okay, I'm a little bit late. Guys have probably recorded. They're so impatient. But then I'm thinking time zones, maybe they didn't. I have just finished the Manchester City versus Arsenal soccer game from the English Premier League. Disappointing last-minute equaliser for Manchester City. I don't know why I'm speaking like that. And that was it was an exciting second half. Arsenal went down to 10 men, I guess, like, in the dying embers of the first half, and then played the second half of only 10 men. So we'll take the draw. It's quite good. Sort of exciting second half. Man City piled on the pressure. That was really good. Which is probably a lot better than my review of that Singapore Grand Prix. I'm just going to look out my window. So I'm in the Ritz-Carlton. The circuit sort of wraps around us. Let's have a look out. I can see some people on the way home. So it looks like some of the teams have finished packing up, which actually, surely not. Surely not. Because, our pack-up's normally 8 hours, so we left the track at, 10 o'clock? So, no way. It's only, say, 4 hours on. So, no, teams are still hard at work. I was looking into the paddock. It used to be my job. I'm literally panning to try and find something exciting to tell you about the Grand Prix. Listen, I won't lie, you probably might have found some exciting bits. I guess Leclerc chasing down at the end was sort of exciting, but apart from that, we went from a race last week, and I think the one before where the top four were separated by a matter of seconds. And again, this race, the top four were separated by only a few seconds. Sadly, those few seconds were about 20 between each of them. I thought it was a real disappointing race. Fair play to Lando. Look, you got to be realistic. Max has been the guy, hasn't he? Max has been the man who's been there. He's been like he's been a machine. It's been like crazy watching his domination. So for McLaren to actually have cars out that can finish 20 seconds above him, and and again, credit to him for finishing 20 seconds in front of Piastri, who sort of got the same car as Lando, who finished 40 seconds ahead of him. And I don't know, I didn't really get that gripped and excited by it, if I'm being honest. But look, we've had a really good run of good races. Let's not get all emotional about this one. How can I explain Singapore? Singapore is a very good city. So it's sort of like the Monaco of Malaysia, which, that's probably a really rough comparison, I guess. But it's an okay place. It's just ridiculously hot and humid and sweaty and gipping. There's a few words that probably in English that probably don't translate as well in American, but one of them is minging. If something is really bad, horrible, gruesome, it's minging. So Satman's toes you could probably describe as being minging. So, if something mings, then it's obviously a little bit rough. So, I call this place Singa-Ming, based purely on that. So, there we go. That's a bit of a culture for you. Some people outside the room and quite loud and noisy. Apart from that, look, it was disappointing, wasn't it? Let's be fair. If you guys made it sound exciting, I'm really sorry, but I thought it was really disappointing. I didn't think there was really a lot going on. Again, a race. Similar to Baku, there's just no yellow flags. There's no safety car. There just doesn't seem to be anything to. I don't want to say neutralise a race. I don't want to sound like one of those people, but it's. I don't know what to say, guys. All I will say is, in a few weeks' time, we're going to be in Austin. Austin is a fantastic city. Anyone who is American or anyone who's anywhere in the world needs to go to Austin. It's a fantastic place. So I'm actually buzzing to get there. I've got a little bit of a holiday over in Thailand before that, little island called Koh Samui. It's fantastic. Beers are about $1. It's blue sky. The seas are clear. There's a threat of ladyboys, but it's a simple check to eliminate them. And then, I'm actually going to be in Boston for 2 nights. So you never know. Look, you don't know who you might meet on these trips. But yeah, looking forward to getting to America. This one's disappointing. Let's pull it behind us. We've had some great races this year. Let's move on to the USA. See, I tried to be positive. Good night, all.
And again, as per last week, no idea what you just said, Paul, but I'm sure it was amazing. You are probably currently watching the Arsenal-Man City game, which I've been watching on a phone down here. So every time Brian has been wondering why I'm looking down there, It's the 68th minute, and we're currently 2-1 up, but down to 10 men. Anyway, that's probably what Paul's watching, and we'll hear what he said when I edit it in later. So, slap house stats music, I guess.
Let's do it. Thanks, Paul. That was great. And now on to the Slap House stats. Sap Stats Slap House Singa-Bore edition.
Singa-Bore.
Sorry.
Oh.
It was the first ever, as we already said, first ever safety car-free Singapore Grand Prix, and the first without a yellow flag. And again, this one is me. I'm fairly certain it's the 8th race in a row this season without a safety car. It was led from start to finish by a single driver for the 3rd consecutive year. It was Norris's 3rd Grand Prix victory. He's the 5th different winner in the last 5 Singapore Grand Prix, the others being Carlos, Checo, Seb, a blast from the past, and Lewis. It's the first time in the last 10 races that someone's won from pole, which is fascinating. We've actually talked a little bit about that over the last few races. And it was the first time, I hate to do this, but it was the first time Lando has led the first lap when starting from pole in his F1 career. So hopefully he doesn't have to hear that anymore. Interestingly, I thought Max had a lot of domination when the season started. You and I talk about this. When the season started, yeah. Max was so far ahead, we're like, oh God, another rerun of the year. Lando now has the 2 largest winning margins of the season. The Netherlands and tonight, 20 seconds, 20.9 seconds. It was even bigger than that, as we both know. He kind of gave some of it back towards the end. Max was 2nd for Red Bull. He's never won in Marina Bay. It's the only circuit on the calendar that he hasn't won. And my favorite stat of the day is right now. Max Verstappen has led 3 laps of Singapore in his entire F1 career. Do you know that Antonio Giovinazzi, Italian racing Jesus, has led 4?
Wow.
What? How is that possible? Oh, man. Anyway, the reigning world champion's now winless in the last 8 races. This podium was a 2nd in the last 6. Oscar was P3 for McLaren for his 7th podium of the season. And Piastri has completed every racing lap this season, 1,083 laps. That's pretty cool when you think about it. He's the only driver, and we've heard this a couple races now because it's been that way for a couple, but he's up to 1,083 laps. George scored points in Singapore for the first time in his career. We kind of did this in the preview last week. You remember he was 3rd and really pushing it last season because he was hot and trying to catch 2nd and crashed. So he redeemed himself. I thought he drove a pretty good race as well. P5 for Leclerc. It ends a run of 4 consecutive podium finishes for Charles, which also, if you remember, he's kind of been going up in the standings. He still has a chance. It was Hamilton's 350th Grand Prix. Dang, I didn't realize. I knew we'd crossed 300 a while ago, but 350 snuck up on me when I saw that. There were a lot of numbers that were important tonight. 350. It was Fernando Alonso's 395th. So Lewis still has 45 races to go after Fernando retires to catch him. And Carlos was his 200th Grand Prix start tonight, and he finished P7th. He obviously won last year, holding Lando in his DRS, if you remember that. It was P8 for Aston Martin and Fernando Alonso, his first Singapore points since 2018, not to be confused with 2008 when Crashgate happened 10 years prior. Sorry, I keep bringing that up.
Good job on getting points from inside witness protection.
Was he in the race? I saw Lance Stroll at one point getting passed, and then I thought it was Fernando, and then it was in the back of the track, and that was all I saw. The P9 for Nico, which I already highlighted as my king of the pits, was Haas's best ever Singapore result. It actually ties it from 2017 with Romain Grosjean. I tweeted a video this morning of someone mispronouncing everybody's names wildly. It was great. They called him Grosjean, and it was fantastic. Red Bull finished Checo P10, scored 1 point in the last 2 Grand Prix. It's just Checo, we gotta turn it around. This is the first time Yuki in P12 ever finished the Singapore Grand Prix. It was Esteban in P13's best finish since the summer break. And then I'm going to close it with Danny Rick. Daniel Ricciardo was P18 for Red Bulls. He took the fastest lap away from his former employers at McLaren in the race's dying stages, as Sean Kelly wrote. I'm reading his note on this one. It was his first fastest lap since winning the 2021 Italian Grand Prix, and it was his 257th Grand Prix, since we're talking about overall numbers, and it could very well be his last. So we wish him well, the Honey Badger. The last note I have on the entire race is what Danny Rick took away, and this is what I already said. I was watching and saying, would Lando get the Grand Slam? He took it away from Lando having it. The last time a McLaren driver had the Grand Slam, which is starting pole, fastest lap, winning, and leading every lap, was Mika Hakkinen in the 1998 Monaco Grand Prix. So McLaren has not had a Grand Slam in a long time. And that is it. Oh, the SAP stats.
Well, and just one last little statoid to go on there is, despite Lando's dominant win, because Max pulled it home second, Lando's average points per race needed to win the championship actually went up today. So although he's taken a chunk out of the lead, he didn't actually take as much as he needed to average per race. I think I saw that it's gone up to something like 8 point something. So yeah, it's all these people kind of still think we're in for this big Grand Slam race to Abu Dhabi. I just think if Max can keep doing that, even if Lando is perfect, we're just running out of races. Lando to really have a shot at this absolutely needs a Max DNF. That would be the thing that would really. Yep. I got a feeling that Red Bull have maybe rectified some of the really poor races that we've seen recently, and Max could quite easily be podium bound for the rest of the season. If he is, that'll kind of be that. But boy, the constructors now, McLaren, Oscar doing that comeback drive, Checo really kind of letting the team down with his points haul, and McLaren have just pulled further away now, 516 versus 475.
Wow. I mean, this is shaping up to be a fascinating season, and we'll see what happens. Fantasy-wise, we did not get a chance to do Baku because A, it was provisional, and B, they were having trouble assessing the data, or whatever it was the words were on. Yeah, it's what it said on Fantasy last week. So last week, I finished 12th, 253 points, but no one cares about me. Rob did about the same. He was 17th, 236, not far off. However, last week, number one, Chicago Gooner Adam Brown. That's Adam's third top one finish in a row. He's been on the top second podium 3 races in a row, and I know Adam. And he has texted me so many things about not giving him the proper credit he deserves. So, Adam, congratulations for finishing first in the last 3 races. That is pretty impressive.
Although one little question, Adam, you have done it 3 times in a row, and that is absolutely fantastic. But how gutted are you that you had 299 points this week? I mean, just one more point, man. Last week, sorry, yeah. 300, man. Yeah, great performance from Adam there.
And just to give credit to close Baku's fantasy, Shui Transmitted Disease, Matt, second. What's the Racing Point, John, third. The M Team Mayall, fourth. Merckstappen, Factory, fifth. Tie for 6th, Team Minimal Effort, Lee, our Discord champion, and Waystar Royko Busan, as I said, tied for 6th. 8th, Professor's B Team, Rakesh, 9, Real Karuna from Aryadev, and then 10th, Phoenix AMG Usama. So good work by everybody last week. They're still provisional points, at least last time I checked. But provisionally in our league right now, number one is the champs team, Steve. 236. I'm 13th. 174. That's a bad number. I can keep strolling down. Rob, you're provisionally 22nd with 166. You're right behind me. Just a lot of people in the same area. You're only 8 points behind. So tight one. We'll find out. When those finalize, we will go off provisional, and next week we will share the overall winners from Fantasy this week. And we'll give since we have like a 47-week break, we'll give an update fully on the top 10 standings, not just for Singapore, but for the season to date in Fantasy.
Yeah, so as you said, we go off into now the fall break, or the autumn break, which we didn't realize was coming. Well, we did, but we kind of forgotten about it, and it's pretty much as long as the summer break, so yay. So that now means that me and Brian have to go and actually work out what kind of content we can do next week, and for the week after, and the week after, and the 700 weekends after that, before we actually get to talk a race again. But we'll come up with something. We always do. Yeah, but I know you're itching to go and watch the Packers game, Brian. So do you want to close us out?
I do. Yeah. So you know what? Again, this season has been tremendous, and we've talked about it, and you've talked about it, and Rob Reed's talked about it, and a lot of people said what a great year it is. It is. Was today the Crockpot edition of one of the meals? Yes, it was, and that's okay. Because we'll be back better than ever with the U.S. Grand Prix in 416 weeks from now to finish out this season. But we are here for you on the dirty side. We will be back to scratch that Formula One itch in 1 week's time with some kind of content that we will figure out. We can't wait to talk to you in 1 week's time, everybody. Be well, be safe. Take care.